Hello, my name is Michael, and today is going to be part 1 of an oral history to Team Lightning. So essentially, Team Lightning is a story I've been working on for quite a while now, probably going on 9 or 10 years. And I've gotten a lot of questions about it, and while it's been definitely a passion project of mine to try and write down everything about it, it's been a challenge. So I figured I would start this history, and I would just sit down and I would just talk about it. And probably gonna get up to the start of like where the books would start, and probably gonna end there and then see if there's interest and I have the will to keep on going on. But even that's gonna be quite a lot to get through. So if you want to go ahead and be along for the journey, feel free. I have one video uploaded right now about who's the strongest character, because a lot of people are asking me that, and if you just want to know about that and hop off the crazy train, you can do that. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I do not own this image at all, nor is this image meant to like represent anything, it just looks cool. So that's why it's here. So before we start, you should know Team Lightning history is split up into arcs. We're going to start with arc -1, and we should be able to get through the majority of arc -1 today. And we'll go into some of the other stuff the other days. So, the entirety of Team Lightning is kind of shrouded in mystery, but we know it started by a group who we simply refer to as Number Zero, in this case standing for Civilization Zero, or I guess the first civilization ever exist. And they created quite a few things. The first thing they did was they created the 26 truths, which were split up between the 13 true truths and the 13 timid truths. Which actually, let me go ahead and grab. Talking about all that, so I can be accurate. So we will eventually go over all of these truths. For right now, we're just going to go over the ones you need to know. And you should know these truths are kind of like abstract, sort of sometimes abstract, meanings for things and how the world works. So the first truth we need to understand is the 7th true truth. So I'm just going to put this here. That's going to get annoying actually. Whatever. So we have the 7th, that is going to be out of order, but the 7th true truth, which goes ahead and details for us the difference between the true and timid truths, as well as just generally how the truths work. If that makes sense. So the 7th true truth essentially details the truths. Now the difference between the true truths and the timid truths is pretty simple. True truths cannot be changed. They are completely and totally rigid. Timid truths can be changed within the confines of their original meaning, if that makes sense. So for instance, let me go ahead and show you a timid truth. So one of them, for instance, is that time, which is the 2nd true truth, or the 2nd timid truth, sorry, is that time is a constant. So if you want to change within those meaning, you could change the 2nd timid truth to say that time is not a constant. Or time is a blank, time is a loop, I guess you could say. You can just change that definition, essentially, within its abstract meaning. So the couple other truths you need to know, most of them are true truths. You need to know the first true truth, and the 2nd true truth. So the first true truth, it describes string fate theory, which we'll go over in a second. And the 2nd true truth is pretty simple. It says for everything, there must be, or everything must have an equal but purposeful opposite. So essentially, you're yin and you're yang, you know? And it's more on a basis of, like, destruction. So if I have, you know, a building, I have to have a bulldozer to break it down. It has to have an equal but very purposeful opposite. And that's going to be important pretty soon. Now we're going to go over string fate theory. And, sorry, apologies, I feel like I'm talking a little bit fast, but string fate theory, essentially what it is they created a number of prophecies. It's unknown, but it's probably in like the 10,000s. 10 of thousands, whatever. A lot of prophecies. And within these prophecies, they had specific names that related to a string fate number. So for instance, the big one is the end is never, hope is forever, hope is the key, everything ends at Fool's Fate Mountain. Now within this, there are a couple takeaways, well, 2 takeaways technically. You have never here, which goes ahead, and that's a special string fate. And hope is also a completely different special string fate number. So in this case, those are 2 different shades. So in this case, never is 255 and hope is 256. So those are probably the 2 most important ones. And obviously if you read this, so at first it says the end is never, but at first glance that'd be like, oh, okay, cool. But what you do realize is that it's actually saying the person who has the string fate theory, or the string fate number 255, is the end. Or in this case, they're going to be the person that starts the Solace of Oblivion, which I'll also get to in a second. And hope in this case is not only forever, meaning that whoever hope is will, or at least their spirit will last forever. They're also the key. The key to what? We don't know. And then of course we also get at the end here, everything ends at Fool's Fate Mountain, which is a place. So the one other string fate that you need to know for right now is 2-1-1-2-3-3, which let me go ahead and write what these relate to. So 255 is never, 256 is hope, and this refers to the weapon that will start the Solace of Oblivion, or we'll just say the objects, even though that's probably the weapon, the objects that will start the Solace of Oblivion. Now, it should also be noted that a person can have multiple string fate numbers attached to them, and more than one person can share the same string fate number. So, you could have lots of people with 255, and whoever is 255 could have a bunch of other ones, and there's a bunch of string fate numbers, there's a bunch of prophecies. So yeah, so what is the Solace of Oblivion? Well, okay, let's back up for a second. So, they did all this, right? This is what number 0 did. So now, after this, they create civilization, essentially, or what we would call, like, reality. It's the first timid truth is reality. And essentially, they create the alphas and the deltas. So alpha was the first civilization. And alpha lived, we don't exactly know what happened, so alpha number 1. And then at a certain point, the Solace of Oblivion happened. And when the Solace of Oblivion happens, which remember, pertains to this prophecy, so whoever is 255 is going to be the one who starts the Solace of Oblivion, using whatever object has the string fate number 2-1-1-2-3-3. Start the Solace of Oblivion, and that will destroy all of creation, all of reality, will be wiped out. But because of the second true truth, everything must have an equal purposeful opposite. It's going to create an opposite civilization, essentially, because from the opposite of nothing is something. So when alpha number 1 goes through the Solace of Oblivion, we get delta number 2. Then delta number 2 goes through the same thing, eventually delta number 2 is destroyed by the Solace of Oblivion, and we get delta number 3. And this process just keeps on repeating all the way to our current day of delta 1001, which is a pretty big number. Not much significant happened up until this point. And even though our time starts delta 1001 isn't technically the significant one. Technically the significant one is actually alpha 1000. Let me also, that time is a constant. Because when the Solace of Oblivion happens, everything is wiped out. But in alpha 1000, someone was actually able to survive the Solace of Oblivion, and they were able to kind of carry over into delta 1001. And that completely messed up Delta 1001. And that's what kind of broke this cycle, or will break this cycle. And that's how the story of Team Lightning begins, and why the story of Team Lightning is so impactful. Out of any point in time in this huge timeline, why do I talk about this time? And that's because of this, because in Alpha 1000, this person was able to survive. And I think eventually we might go back and explore what happened in Alpha 1000, what those circumstances were, once we're done with Delta 1001 and Alpha 1002. We'll probably go back to Alpha 1000. But that's like way down the line. Not only in terms of an oral history of Team Lightning, but just the actual, books themselves. What on earth is playing? Pop radio. I just have that going in the background as like background music. Any feedback you have about this, please leave it. I know this is like scuffed to the extreme. So there's probably a lot I could improve here in terms of everything, but hopefully if this is what you want, it's enjoyable. And I'm trying to make it quick. I'm not trying to dilly-dally. I know I'm catching myself with my words quite a bit, but I don't have a script or anything. I'm just speaking from my brain, what it is. Because anything else, honestly, I'm lazy. Anything else would have been too much work. So now we have all this going on. So the person who kind of watches over each of these alphas and deltas, they have a couple names. They're known as the White Heart and the Black Heart, because it's both of them together. They're known as the Bastion of each civilization, and they're most referred to as the Creator. So for right now, we'll refer to them as the Creator. All we know about them is they're a being from number 0. By the way, one of the other truths, which one was it? It's the 8th true truth. Basically states that, understanding number 0 is impossible. Or I use the word unreachable, but it's interchangeable. Essentially, understanding number 0 at civilization is like physically impossible. You will not be able to do it. So this is like the only being from there that we can understand, and he made it purposefully. Not a he, it's an it. Doesn't have a gender. It made it purposefully so that way you could understand it. Essentially. And this is the only being we know from that mysterious first civilization. So, Delta 1001 starts, and the second it starts, a couple things go wrong. Like I said, someone from Alpha 1000 survived the Solace of Oblivion, and so when they get into this new reality, so every time the Creator comes to a new civilization, he has to essentially make it over from scratch again. But when this mysterious person from Alpha 1000 comes in, they kind of mess up everything, and they end up becoming infused with the Blackheart side of the Creator. And essentially what branches off from the Creator is Never. It's 255, also known as the Darkness in this case, gets the string fate Never. So we'll just say Darkness equals 255. And the Darkness in this case is... So the Darkness is the Blackheart fused with the Stranger from Alpha 1000. So it kind of branches off, essentially. And this new person, what they did, so we're still at this point where reality doesn't really make sense. So all of these people living right now are existing in a place called not reality, literally, which is just because reality doesn't exist yet. And so nothing really makes sense. So obviously this person from Alpha 1000 is going to have a hard time really understanding not reality. So they're kind of just like this angry spirit. And they end up, their one goal is they want to kill the Creator. So they create the Zero Saber, or when all of them are together, it's known as the Requiem of Solace. So, the Requiem of Solace is also called the Zero Saber, but when it's destroyed, we'll get to that in a second, and the fragments shift across time, all those fragments are referred to as the Zero Saber, never as the Requiem of Solace. So you will sometimes hear me refer to the Requiem of Solace as, like, the Zero Saber, but you will never call the shards of the Requiem of Solace the Requiem of Solace, because you will only refer to it as Requiem of Solace when all of them are put back together, and you get the Requiem Solace, which was the original one. And the Requiem Solace / the Zero Saber has one really, really special thing about it. So the Zero Saber, I'm just going to refer to it right now as the Zero Saber, defies string fate theory. Because it contains, it contains zero-sum fate, meaning it contains no string fate number. It's not bound by anything. And because of that, it has the ability to kill the creator, because there's a number of things in place, number of fates in place, to make sure you can't kill the creator. But the creator catches wind of this, and uses the newly created, because of the second true truth here. Because something new was created out of nothing, which in this case was the Requiem Solace / the Zero Saber, an opposite thing had to be created, which in this case was the All Sword. Which contains every fate number. Contains every single one of them, including 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3. So it includes that string fate number. So this weapon could potentially start a Souls of Oblivion. It's also incredibly strong. So he uses his power along with destroying his puppet, which we'll get to like theology and puppets and stuff later. There's also a truth that relates to how puppets work, which we'll also get to later. Essentially, he destroys his puppet, which is how he can physically embody his power. And along with, doesn't destroy the All Sword, but he uses the All Sword to kind of try to destroy the Zero Saber / Requiem Solace. So when he does this, he destroys it, and he sends fragments of the Requiem Solace across time and space. And all these little fragments become little tiny Zero Sabers. And he also kind of like dumbs down this evil spirit's power and the darkness's power. And what's left of him is the White Heart, and the White Heart becomes the light. So the White and the Black Heart, what they essentially do, the White Heart can create things, and the Black Heart can destroy them. Technically, you can't destroy energy, that's another truth here. Let me go ahead and write down some of these truths I've been talking about. So, so the fifth true truth is that energy, let me go ahead and try to get the exact definition. Energy makes up reality and cannot be destroyed, just changed. And the other one I talked about was puppets, which are, is that a timid truth? No, that's the true truth. Third true truth. Which describes how the entire, God system works. And referring to them as gods, in this case, is just easy. The best way to describe them is like paracausal powers, essentially. They're like, just like mystical powers that we really can't quantify or truly understand. So we just refer to them as gods. And there's like an entire pantheon and stuff, which we'll get to later. I'm gonna say that a lot. I feel like that's gonna be the main thing I'm gonna say throughout this entire series. It's just, we'll get to that later, because I want to kind of go in a certain order of explaining things, and I name drop a lot of things, which maybe I shouldn't be doing. Again, extremely scuffed. Go ahead and tell me what I should be doing better, if anybody even watches this for whatever reason. So, we have the All Sword, we have the Zero Saber, we have all this happening, so the creator sacrificed himself and his puppet to destroy the Zero Saber and kind of used up the power of the All Sword. And what was left was the White Heart and the Black Heart, which became the light and the darkness. So the light creates, the darkness destroys. So the light was tasked with creating this new civilization, and it ends up taking the light 255 tries to create the perfect light dimension. And all of these failed attempts were the darkness couldn't destroy them, so he put them into a separate kind of plane of reality, which we'll get to, like, subspace. We'll get to that later. We'll get to describe how the planes of reality intersect between, the shells and everything. It's called subshell theory, I want to say, something like that. We'll get to that later. But essentially puts it in a completely different plane of reality, which he ends up calling the Null Sector, and puts a copy of himself in charge called is there 2 R's in Armageddon? That doesn't look right. 2 G's maybe? No. 1 F? 2 D's. I knew there was 2 of them in there, whatever. So he puts a copy of himself in charge called Armageddon of the Null. So he puts Armageddon in charge of the Null Sector. So 255 dimensions in the Null Sector. The light goes ahead and creates this perfect light dimension, and it's all hunky-dory. After he creates that dimension, the darkness goes ahead and creates a copy of it called the Dark Dimension, and actually puts it in the same sort of sub-shell where the light dimension is. And I will, next episode, I'll go ahead and I'll put maps up of everything, and where, I can show you, like, visually the map of how everything looks. So right now we have Not Reality, Light Dimension Major, and the Null Sector within the shell of Delta 1001. And technically there's 4 other shells that exist within Delta 1001. We're in shell 5 at this point, and we'll get to how all of that works later, because those shells are going to be important later. We're either in shell 5 or 1. I'm not sure which. Technically they're like the same thing, they are the same thing, just number-wise. Within the context of time, it's kind of confusing, if that makes any sense, which I'm sure it doesn't. So we have all that. We're almost to the end of Arc -1, because Arc 0 starts with the destruction of Earth. So we have all this. We get our 4 habitable galaxies, which is Doomsknum, Camelot, and Milky Way Galaxy, along with the alien sectors, which is where all the alien species lives. And we get to the year 2200 something, and humans have created cyborg life, essentially. And we also create an AI to kind of control the cyborgs, control the systems in the cyborgs. But the AI becomes sentient and goes rogue and kind of makes all of these, human-enhanced cyborgs try to kill us and take them over. And the second these cyborgs kill somebody, people they killed get turned into cyborgs, which just kind of escalates and snowballs to the point where humanity is doomed. So we abandon the planet, Earth is destroyed, we end up getting saved by the Kalamatas, which we will start, and the destruction of Earth starts Arc 0. And Arc 0 spans all the way up into Arc 1, which is the creation of the 256 Lightning Council, which is like 12,000 years we have to cover, and multiple wars, and just a crazy amount of stuff. Also, like I said, we're going to go over theology, the rest of the truths, how energy works, might go a little bit into politics, more into geography, just generally everything about the world. And this is kind of like your stepping off point. I'm going to try to upload a video a day. If all of this just sounds like it's like too crazy for you, then just feel free to have watched this. I'm glad that you were interested, and now, you can make a couple jokes with me. I reference the second true truth a lot. I reference a lot of stuff. And now you have a more understanding. So when I say something, be like, oh, that's like this, and then I'll go into more detail on it if you want me to. So yeah, this is the first episode of An Oral History of Team Lightning. I hope you enjoyed. Please, please, please leave a comment saying, hey, I watched it, and if you want, you can also add some feedback. I'd really appreciate some feedback. Maybe advice on how to make this more interesting visually and how to make it less scuffed. Like I said, probably will never have a script, because the point of this was for me to be extremely lazy and putting it all in there. I just kind of talk from my brain and try to put it all down, because writing it all down has just been so incredibly taxing that I figured this would be much easier for me and way easier to distribute and get people to watch. Just me talking compared to having to read, just like paragraphs upon paragraphs of information.